Welcome to the podcast. We're so glad that you joined us today. We have been in motion. I don't know about you, but our summer has been extremely full.
We've been
Is it over
we've been on two separate pages because
True.
you have been in motion doing lots of things, and I have been doing nothing because I unexpectedly was sick in bed for almost 3 weeks.
I know.
2.5 weeks. So
it was awful. I'm so
while
sorry.
Mike was traveling to Ireland
Gallivanting
and
around.
going to the Eucharistic Congress, I was literally in the same four walls for 2 weeks and then kind of out a little bit after that. But I'm better now, so yay.
And so in the last podcast that came out, it was the Eucharistic Congress that we did live. So you heard that Alicia was sick. So this is, this is just a week and a half later or whatever from the Eucharistic Congress.
Yeah.
But I'm...
And then today Mike was like, I think I'm getting sick. I was like, no.
I'm not allowed. Not happening.
No, just deny it.
but it has been really good. Like I look back on
the travel or me being
the
sick?
travel. I'll speak for myself. The travel was great. I think I mentioned the trip to Ireland.
Yes, you did.
Particularly with my daughter and my grandson. Oh, it was so good.
Yeah.
Anyway, loved it. There was so much that I could share about. If you're interested, just message me. I'd love telling stories about what the experience was in Ireland. But then before that we had the family reunion, and then
with the Doman family reunion,
side of the
which
family,
was kind of crazy.
Which we talked about the video previously, and then we're at the Eucharistic Congress, and now we're today. And anyway, so we have two getaways. If you're not familiar with them. One is to Colorado Springs this fall, and then Costa Rica next year. And we are sold out. I can probably get I've got one more room that I got for somebody to Colorado Springs, but it is full.
That's our domestic, more like reasonably priced, I guess,
right.
getaway, but still at a gorgeous, beautiful place. And
love the resort. Really excited about it. And Father Doug, one of the national chaplains for Focus, will be joining us on that. Really, really excited.
Yes.
And then in Costa Rica, we will be with Chris and Natalie Stefanik, as well as Father Sean Monahan of the Oblates.
I want you to think about this. When did we start talking about Costa Rica? I feel like it was not that long ago. We have 7 spots left, guys. I
think it's down to...
I want to go back and see when is the first time we mentioned it on the podcast.
Oh, true.
So, it has not been very long. So
we tell people to sign up. So anyway, if you're interested in that, go to our website, CatholicCouplesGetaway.com. And we're
planning more trips. So we're going to keep
we'll keep it going. So
if
if those dates don't work for you, we will continue to do at least 2 a year. And hopefully that'll fit your schedule at some time. And if you don't join us, please make sure you make time to go away with your beloved.
Make time for each other.
And remind yourself, this is your beloved, right? That's what we do when we take the time to go away. I get it with little kids. It is tough. But when you can leave them, please do. They will thank you, and it will be good for everybody.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to get into a podcast. This is a re-release podcast, and I think that it is absolutely a timeless issue, and this is about self-control and teaching kids self-control.
Is this about me and self-control?
You know what? It's so funny because I feel like we expect our kids to have so much emotional control, but it's just like, guys, let's take a time out and look at ourselves and be like, what do I need to learn first to teach my kids? But we give lots of examples in this, which I think is really good, and some good strategies for, first of all, why it's so important that we do train our children to control their emotions, to be able to have self-control, but then also how to do it. And give some good examples and actually
it's vital.
What's interesting is that doing this podcast, this was 6 years ago. So a lot of the kids that we talk about in this podcast are now teenagers or almost adults. And honestly, I am looking at what we've done. And of course, nobody's perfect, right? Everybody's still a work in progress. But I'm like,
our kids have developed a deeper sense for sure. And it's because we became more intentional. It helped ripple through for them to become more intentional.
And kind of gave us, because we've been doing this and talking to our children about stuff like this for so long, I feel like there is, even if they do, have big emotions, we have a way of talking to them about it.
And self-control is a kind of a lever or leverage point for a lot of other things. If you don't have this, it really does fall
other
apart.
Things are more difficult.
So anyway, so take a listen to this episode, and we'll jump back and have some takeaways and questions for you.
Claire is 5. She's our youngest, number 10.
I was kind of hoping that when we had her, it was like, hey, Lord, just like have 9, get 1 free, like make her really easy. And God was like,
Sucker.
Claire is very, very challenging.
She is feisty and she is strong-willed.
She's going to be
She's actually the strongest-willed child I think we have.
She absolutely is. Absolutely.
And
she's going to be an amazing woman someday.
But we love her. She is totally cool and fun and adorable and many times, which makes us not want to throw her away. Right.
Well, she has had, we've had a big issue with her in the past couple months of her just kind of waking up on the wrong side of the bed.
Right.
Basically, she wakes up. She used to like skip into our room, very happy and whatever. But I don't know what's going on. She's going through a growth spurt or whatever. But her normal wake up time, she'll wake up and she'll just be freaking out.
Yeah, and it's not like a little like I'm sad or moping. It's like she's literally on the bed crying, screaming and pouting and stamping her hands and feet. And
Right. And it's for no reason other than she just kind of doesn't want to go to school or whatever. So Mike, so we both kind of deal with this in different ways, but in getting ready for this talk, Mike had a actual instance like 2 days ago with Claire.
So I really, again, we had let it go on a little bit, and we thought maybe she'd just kind of grow out of it, but then clearly it wasn't. It was continuing on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And as we already mentioned, Claire is a very smart girl, and she's a very strong-willed girl. And so I knew that...
So this particular morning,
I knew that I couldn't go through the front door, like in the sense that I couldn't address the problem head on. And so I looked for a side door.
You couldn't just go in there and be like, get dressed right now. I'm going to give you a spanking or whatever.
And she's 5 years old,
Mm-hmm.
And
it's not going to work for her.
With a teenager, I might take that approach.
But you can't give them a spanking when they're a teenager.
True. But I wouldn't want to give her a spanking for doing something like this, right?
Right.
So it's like, so I needed to talk to her. And so I came in with some insight and saying, okay, I'm going to intervene in this situation. I'm going to try to solve as much as I can, set up a solution for this problem. And I went in with my happy, cheery voice, went into Claire and said, hey, Claire, how's it going? And blah, blah. But
kind of ignoring the fact that she had herself on the grounds crying.
Right. And so, and trying to sneak around the front door of her emotional outbursts.
Right.
And,
and to help kind of diffuse the situation.
Right. Mm-hmm. And so what I looked at is, one, I said, I knew this was important because there was a war. Now, having teenagers that have gone through similar things, again, she's a different child, but knowing that the more that I invest now when she is 5 years old, my teenage years with her are going to be far better. So I've got to work now to win the battle, because there will be payoff for us and for her, because this has long-term consequences for her. And so getting her to a place where she could earn or develop self-control on our own, I knew was essential. So going in and saying, this is worth it.
This is one of the advantages that we have, and that we hope we are giving this advantage to our listeners.
Right.
Because we have 10 children, and we have had 5-year-olds who have freaked out, who maybe we didn't train perfectly, who, then struggled as teenagers.
That's right.
Even. And so
we screwed up our first 5, pretty much. Really.
They're wonderful. But we have kind of seen the results of doing or not learning or not learning, it's self-control. And so now with our younger ones, we're like, okay,
this is serious.
This is really serious. We know this.
It is so easy to just ignore it and just hope they grow out of it. And there's some truth to it. They might grow out of it.
Like, I think one of the reasons we were like kind of letting it go is because she was sick for a little while, and but now it's just like, no. We need to have some direct instruction here to win this battle, because this is part of an overall training of self-control.
Right. And the reality is that when you are an adult, particularly as the dad, and not that I am coercing, but I have a natural authority in my child's life. I have authority in all of my children's life, but when they are small, I am big. When they don't know a lot, I do. You know, there's all these reasons where I have an opportunity.
We're still smarter than them at this point.
For the moment. That's right. For the moment. And so therefore you've got to take this as an opportunity where they love you, they adore you, they almost worship you. And so taking that opportunity to speak into their lives is a golden opportunity right now.
So what did you do with Claire?
All right. So
what did you say to her?
All right. So first, if you've listened to any of the other podcasts, I probably mentioned this, that I parent by distraction. All right. So I said I didn't go in the front door. So, you know, when they say when you're angry, their synapses in your brain are getting fused together and it's harder for her to think. Right. So what I try to do is go to the side door and engage her in something else. And for me, I know how much she loves like working with me or having special time with Dad.
Even just working outside, cleaning up the yard or whatever.
She is all like into that. Right. Mm-hmm. And so I talk about that. And it automatically, I could see a break in this wall of emotion, and then it slowly began to the waters began to recede. You know, there was just a faint glimmer of hope. It wasn't huge, but it was like, okay, she stopped freaking out.
And you were like, hey, remember after school today, we're going to do this and blah, 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 blah.
Right. And so just planting those seeds like, hey, remember we talked about doing this. Well, today is the day that you and I are going to go and have some special time. And we're going to do you help Daddy around the house a little later today after you're done with Montessori school. And you could see the face begin to change. Mm-hmm. And it's like again, getting those little...
It's engaging her brain.
That's right.
Engaging the logical part of her brain.
Because you need to turn the switch. And so it's getting that distraction, go around the side door and getting her thinking about something else. And then it's going to something that I do every day with our guys when they're growing up. I say, who's in charge of having a good day? It's something that I think is...
it's one of Mike's maxims.
I know. I don't know why. I don't know where I heard it or... I created it out of thin air, I don't know. Mm-hmm. But they all know it and they repeat it, and it's been driven into them, and they all do it. All the little kids. I think our older kids, we did that too, right?
Yeah. Yes.
And I really wanted to make sure that my kids aren't going to be driven by their emotions, and that they aren't going to be, they're going to be acting as opposed to reacting. And so she knew that, and she knew the response to that. So once I had a opening in the dike, there was a little crack in the wall in her defenses. I said, "Hey, Claire, who's in charge of having a good day?" And just out of habit, she says, "I am." And once I knew I had her, yes.
Her prefrontal cortex was activated.
It's like you see the lights are lighting up. Go, 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 go. And so then we can say, "Claire, right now you have a choice to make." And again, she's a 5-year-old. How much of it is going over her head, I don't know, but she is super smart. And this may not be, again, for every child.
But she wasn't screaming anymore.
She was no longer screaming. She was actually communicating with me.
Right.
And I said, "Claire, you have a choice to make right now. You can choose to allow your emotions to tell you that you're going to have a bad morning, or you can say, no, I am not going to let my emotions control me and determine that I'm going to have a bad morning."
Because Claire is all about being in charge.
She is. And so I leverage that. She wants to be in charge of us. That's right.
She does want to be in charge of us. But when she realized, wait a minute, I don't want my emotions to be in charge of me. I want to be in charge. I want to be the one that says, I'm going to have a good day. And so that kind of language, which may be different for your child, but we're just sharing our experience.
Right.
She was proud that she could conquer that. And she could be in charge.
And the next day, she ran into our room in that morning and said, "Dad, I'm in charge. And I am going to have a good day." Like, she announced this. She was proud that she had conquered her grumpy morningness, right. Whatever. And she overcame that. And
I think, too, when you introduce that language, that's something that if she's wakes up on the wrong side of the bed again, we can use that language once again to help her make good choices.
Right.
So then... yesterday,
that's right.
Our daughter Abby, who is 9, who is extremely emotional.
That's right.
She is not the same kind of...
She's very sensitive, very almost fragile.
Yeah, she's not that same kind of like take charge personality that Claire is.
Not the strong will.
She's very sweet. But when Abby was little, I used to say, Abby's cry, I can't tell whether her arm has just been cut off or if someone just offended her. Like, it's like 0 to 60. Yep. There's no throttle. Like, she would just...
all in.
She is very, very emotional.
She rides that emotional... And I play that forward to her as a teenager
Like,
with
we are in
raging,
so much trouble.
crazy hormones, whatever. So here she is. The situation is kind of silly, but she really...
It was, it wasn't silly because she was missing something. Basically, her friend was at her house, and her friend got picked up to go to this art fair at school.
Right.
But Mike and I hadn't really communicated yet, and I was planning on bringing her, but Mike didn't know that. And so Abby really wanted to go, but Mike said, no, that's not the plan for tonight, to go to this art fair at your school. She was very disappointed.
Which I didn't fully appreciate that at the time.
Because she just walked away.
She walked away. And then I hear her upstairs in her room pouting, crying. So I walk in.
She's crying into her pillow.
She is on her pillow, sobbing, upside down. I mean, she's, what, 10?
9.
9?
She'll be 10 very soon.
Yeah, something like that. And she's in full-on hysteria.
But her head in her pillow.
Head in her pillow. So it was muffled, but it was still...
She was still freaking out. She was out of control.
Yes.
Because that's the thing, is that she just, like I said, no throttle. When she gets really emotional, she just really gets out of control crying.
Right.
And this is not good.
And again, so going back to what I thought about with Claire, I was like, okay, what is different about this child?
Exactly.
And what's going to open her heart and her mind to me? Now, Abby is, again, if you think of even like the kind of love languages and stuff like that.
We have a podcast on the 5 love languages. So if you don't know what we mean, you can go back and listen to that.
But it's the first thing that came into my mind is that Abby is a much more fragile child who both the words and physical touch matter more to her. And so I said, Abby, and I just, with great tenderness and great sweetness, and said, Abby, come here.
Yeah.
And
because you knew that physical touch was a way that she would feel loved.
Right. And so in embracing her and holding her as she's sobbing on my shoulder, saying, Abby, are you crying because you couldn't go to the art fair? Yeah. And I knew that I had to speak and listen to her. Again, very different child than Claire. Mm-hmm. And this is the beauty of being a parent. You have to figure out what those kids are. It's a challenge. It's like a puzzle, right?
That's right.
And
so it was a lot of listening too, and just kind of allowing her to speak and to say, this is what I'm upset about, I think it's important to not dismiss, especially as they get older, to not dismiss and be like, oh, that's silly or whatever, but to be empathetic and to help kind of reflect back, allow them to say those words.
Right, because you don't want to be in a place where they're repressing their emotions or they're suppressing, repressing, whatever the word is. Mm-hmm. And but you want to lead them to a new place. But in order to do that, you have to embrace where they're at and understand and a true empathy of understanding where they're coming from. And to me, it actually wasn't that big of a deal that she wasn't going to the art fair. But obviously it was to her, Right. And so getting to a place where I'm like, okay, I understand. I have a deeper understanding.
And when you show that respect to your child, that really builds a more mature relationship and a real trust that I think it's everybody, all of us want to feel listened to. All of us want to be understood. And your children do too. And sometimes they can't sort out, why am I having this huge reaction to this? And so sometimes it's good to help them to say, I'm sad that I'm not going to the art fair. I was really looking forward to it. I miss my friends, or I'm angry about this. Exactly. And I help them to say that and show you understand.
And from that respect that you just talked about, it also is obviously it's building trust in our relationship. Mm-hmm. That she can trust me. That I'm not going to take her deep, dark secrets and feelings again. Because at that point, when she is 9 going on 10. She still sees me as 100% a loving, trusting, beautiful father. She doesn't know the true me. No. But when those teenage years come, I'm building up that trust. I'm building up a relationship bank account that I will cash in later. So not only teaching, trying to guide her to true self-control, but also building that relationship and building that trust and respect.
So when you go to teach her, so with that trust, the next thing that comes out of your mouth when you're trying to instruct your child, when Mike is trying to instruct Abby, she's going to believe him because she feels listened to, and there's that relationship of trust. So I trust you, the advice that you're going to give me.
Right.
So
then we set a standard.
Yeah.
And then we say, Abby, that again, I didn't go through who's in charge of having a good day, that sort of thing. Although I probably could have. I think she's a little bit more mature. So I'm like, Abby, I understand that you're upset. And that is, I totally get it. And there's going to be a lot of things in your life that are going to upset you. But the reality is that you can't let it destroy the rest of your day and impact the household, because I could hear her downstairs. Even though she was muffled in the pillow, I could hear her from downstairs, right? And so saying,
this reaction is not acceptable.
Yeah, and it's not your emotions that are wrong. It's not being upset that's wrong. It's your response to and allowing you to wallow in your sorrow and what's the right word? But like to really go so deep into that sorrow and morass of go into the crevasse, go down to go up.
Right. Exactly. So what did you say to her? So you kind of said this is not acceptable, and then you had had her make a choice.
Right. And I said, look, right now you can choose. I said, Abby, you can choose to stay here and be miserable. Because I asked her, I said, is crying making you feel better? And again, she was feeling loved and respected by me. And so again, that broke the wall where I could speak into her with some truth and speaking the truth. Is this making you happier? Do you feel better now that you're crying? No. And I'm like, so do you want to feel happier or do you want to just feel bad? Well, happier. And I'm like, so you have a choice to make. You can choose, because I can't ultimately stop you from being upset.
Right.
I said, you have to do that. I said, but I want you to make the choice, and you can stay in this room until you're ready to make that choice. But once you step out of this room, I want you to say, even if you're still upset, say, I'm going to be happy. And I didn't say it, but essentially it's fake it till you make it, because your emotions aren't always going to be there, but your actions need to be there.
Right.
And so
it's kind of like the act of smiling actually makes you feel happier. Even if you force yourself to smile, it actually makes you feel happier.
Right.
So it's the same thing.
Yeah. And so getting to her place and say, I want you to step out and I give you the space for her to make that decision on her own.
You didn't make her like, okay, right now you have to just go do this.
Right. Because every kid's different. We have some kids that might take a longer time for them to get their emotions under control. Right. And
wipe their eyes. And, all
and
that.
so she came out and she made a decision to do that. And what was funny is that in between of her coming out and before she came to me, because I said, when you're done, you can come to me and we can talk about other things that we can do. And I said, I can help you think about other things that you can do instead of going to the art fair that you're going to enjoy and will find bring you more happiness, right? Well, in between, her older sister Maura,
who's 20,
heard that she was crying and said, "Hey, Abby, sometimes when I'm upset, I just want to take a bath." And blah, blah, blah.
And watch TV.
Right. And so she comes in and says, "Hey, Dad, can I watch a show on your iPad?" And blah, blah. And I'm like, sure, why not? Who cares? We had another podcast about screen time. We just like, we're up or down. We do a little bit of this, a little bit of that.
Not screen time is a good pacifier sometimes.
Sometimes, right? It's like a little drug, little upper. Anyway.
It's more like candy.
It is. Hey, there you go. Popping the pill. I mean candy.
Yeah, so older sister kind of stepped in there and gave her some good options, and then she was on her way. And then, happy ending to the story for Abby, I came home and I was like, oh, I was totally planning on taking her to the art fair. Abby, get in the car, let's go. She was like, yay!
And so it was great.
So it all worked out.
Well, it was great because it wasn't just that Abby got to go to the art fair, which was awesome for Abby, but she also learned more about controlling her own emotions and being the master of herself.
Right.
And that's a big thing.
And then I actually, yesterday as well, had another instance with one of our sons, with Mikey, who is 12. And this happens, I think every parent can relate to this probably, because this happens to me like every day practically. We're in the car and I'm driving. And the next thing I know, Abby, again, actually, is crying right behind Mikey. And I was like, what's going on? And Mike says, and Abby's like, he threw a bottle cap at me. And he was like, well, she was throwing pieces of paper at me and I just turned around and threw this bottle cap and it hit her in the face, of course. And so it's just, so, he said, she said, blah, blah, blah. And I said, Mikey, I was just like, that was wrong of you to do that. You should not be throwing stuff at your sister. And of course, the first thing he says, which everyone out there can predict, is, well, she threw something at me first.
Yeah.
And then the thought just came to me.
It.
Yeah, exactly. So the thought just came to me. I said, Mike, if you go into confession and you say to the priest, I'm going to confess throwing something at my sister, and out of anger, will the priest say, oh, well, did she throw something first? And you say, yeah. And would the priest say then, oh, well, then it's not a sin? No, he is not going to say that. And Mike is like, no. And I said, yeah, that's because you are in control of your actions.
Right.
And especially as boys, so we kind of gave our first two instances were with girls freaking out with the emotions. I think self-control with boys, of course, boys, especially when they're little, can be very emotional, especially when they're younger than 6. I think boys and girls are similar in their self-control, emotional, whatever. But as they get older, there's definitely a divergence. Boys, the self-control boys need to learn is controlling their bodies.
That's right.
So when someone ticks you off, you just can't turn around and smack them in the face, throw something at them, throw a punch, all of that. A boy is not, a 10-year-old or 12-year-old boy is not going to fall on the ground crying. He's not going to be crying into the pillow in their room, as a general rule anyway. No, they're going to turn around and they're going to throw something. They're going to kick something. They're going to, do something physical, more aggressive. And so the language that you speak to those young boys, I think, is more of the vein of you need to learn how to control your body. Right. You need to stop and think first before you do something. Because, and I've said this to Patrick, I remember when he was a teenager, because you can really hurt someone.
Yeah, and the reality,
especially boys.
And the reality is that again, we're presenting these examples that are real life examples for us, but you could have male, females slightly different in these examples.
Yes, of course, we're making generalizations, But
the reality is that there is a greater challenge for women in general, girls in general, to have more challenges controlling their emotions, and for boys, which again is really an action, and for boys controlling their anger or their aggression. And those are things that I know as a man that I have struggled more with anger, I think, than you have. Not that we don't both struggle with anger, but I think that's a reality that plays itself out. And these are
I think it's anger too that's demonstrated with physical aggression.
Right. Yeah, that's probably true. It's maybe more in the expression of it rather than
and I think too that men who don't learn how to handle their anger, society kind of like forces them to tamp down their physical aggression, and if they never learn to deal with their anger, that's why a lot of men are depressed.
That's right.
Because they've never learned how to deal with their emotions, how to control their emotions, how to correctly do that.
Right. So and so much of what we're talking about is that emotions aren't necessarily bad, but the response to those emotions is what we're talking about, right?
Exactly.
It's like you can be happy, you can be sad, you can have this, you can have. It's like, but if it's going to actually turn your directions in a new way, you're being driven by your emotions.
Well, that's like the saying, like feelings are like children.
Yeah.
You should not lock them in the trunk of your car, but you really shouldn't let them drive the car either.
That's right.
So just keep that in mind, that your emotions, they're very, very important, and they just come up. But when those things come up, we can't let them be driving the car.
God can use your emotions.
Absolutely.
But the reality is that you need to keep your emotions in check.
Right.
And that's an adult lesson. If you don't know that, let me be the first to tell you.
Yeah, because I think there's adults who haven't necessarily learned this either.
Because this plays itself out in everything from the extreme examples of road rage. I mean, why is there road rage, right?
Yep.
Road rage is because somebody didn't learn, hey, guy, self-control. No big deal. One, it's patience. Yes, it's this. Yes, but ultimately, it's about controlling your emotions.
Right.
Am I going to allow some jerk on the highway who I don't even know get me so angry
that I will do something physically dangerous?
I know people on this podcast right now listening there are some people who
are experiencing road rage right now.
Driving. Yeah, no.
Well, really, all right. So one of the lessons here is to remember that emotional outbursts in your children, especially, it's a training ground, right?
Yes.
But if they are over the age of 10, that's really a sign of immaturity.
Yes,
you need to get on that.
Yes, this is a big deal, right?
Yes.
And this is something you need to know, that you as a parent are responsible for helping train and form them in self-control. Again, there are individuals who might need counseling assistance because they have a more challenging child, or maybe there's kind of hormonal or chemical imbalances, right? Those are situations that you really
diet issues, like all kinds of things like that.
And you can definitely seek professional help if you feel out of your depth. But
run of the mill,
90% plus of kids really what they need is a parent to help form and guide them. And then again, most everybody listening to this podcast is a Christian. So you receive a gift of the Holy Spirit.
That's right.
That is the gift of self-control.
And really, I think especially in our culture, self-control is such an underappreciated virtue, because what do we hear all the time? Like the slogan for kids today is just do it. Just do it. Well, when we were in the 80s, when we were growing up in the 80s, Nancy Reagan had an anti-drug campaign. And you know what her slogan was? Just say no.
Right.
It's like she was from a different era.
Right.
That was from the era of self-control, control yourself, honor, you can do it. And we need to return to that. Instead of telling your kids, hey, just do it, just let it all hang out. No, just say no. And it can really be that simple. We really have to do that. And I will tell you right now, if you Google self-control, you're going to come across, quite frankly, a lot of crap.
Yeah, well, I mean, modern psychology oftentimes sees what we're proposing as repressive,
right,
to children and to adults. That you need to fully embrace your emotions as they come, and they're neutral. And in certain parts, it's true. Your emotions are somewhat neutral. You can be again but it's like, but are you going to let them drive you to making poor decisions, of acting it out on those emotions?
Do you know what? I actually just remembered. I remember seeing a examination of conscience once that cited that allowing ourselves to experience unbridled emotion, whether it's anger or sadness or whatever, as being sinful.
Yeah.
Because really, I mean, that's a real vice of not having that ability to hold ourselves back and to control our actions and our reactions to our emotions. Because I think a lot of times, like as adults, we kind of learn how to control our emotions out of politeness, out of concern with what others think about us, or fear of losing friends, or things like that. But we really need to embrace self-control as adults, as a virtue, and then also communicate that to our children. So, of course, your 2-year-old, your 3-year-old, they are not going to have self-control. You can guide them and discipline them and all of that and guide them on that way. But because you really are providing the controls at that point.
That's right.
But we're talking about when they are stepping over from babyhood into a more of a concrete level, rule-based way of thinking, the young child, 5 and up.
And they're developing their moral core. They're developing, and what is at the heart of that moral core is self-control, self-mastery. And also, too, I mean, just to put this in a family dynamic, the reality is that you need your children to have that integrity, if you will, or that self-mastery, self-control for the sake of your family.
Absolutely.
You can't have one child pulling down, because one child could pull down the whole family in some ways, right? And that is also true in society as a whole. Somebody we listen to quite a bit, or have in the past, talks about happiness is a moral obligation. And in the sense that you need to present yourself, approach the world with a sense of happiness. Because when you are dour, when you are sad, when you are kind of almost morbidly, depressed. Again, I'm not talking about the people in the clinical stuff, right? but that disposition has an influence, a negative influence on your household.
Right.
And that's not acceptable.
No.
And so it's, again, getting our kids to the place where when they're younger, it's much easier, but you still have to do it even if they're older and when they're teenagers, because you don't want to have that teenager who is moping around the house and dragging other people into their vortex of negativity.
Right.
And it's like, you know what?
That's not respectful of the
No,
community.
it's not good. It's not good for you, but it's not respectful for this family, which is the basis of all community.
If one really interesting test that we came across, that brings out so many really good points about self-control, and some of you may have heard about it. It's called the marshmallow test.
I love marshmallows, just for the record.
I think it's Walter. I think it's his first name, Walter Mischel. He did this marshmallow test in the 50s and 60s, and the reason it's important is because it was a longitudinal test. They tested these children from the 50s and 60s when they were teenagers, and then again when they were in their 40s.
Right.
And I think he published.
And the first was the research just on when they were young.
Right. And so what they were testing was, so they would put the child, I think they were 4-year-olds, put them in a room, gave them a marshmallow, and said, if you wait if you have this marshmallow, if you do not eat this marshmallow for a certain amount of time until I come back, when I come back, I will give you 2 marshmallows. If you can't take it anymore and you want to eat the marshmallow, just ring a bell and
you can have the marshmallow. You have the 1 marshmallow, not the 2, but you.
Right, and you just get the 1 marshmallow. And actually, now that I'm thinking about this, I feel like there's a YouTube video or something out there of this being repeated.
I remember seeing,
And so basically what he found is that when they looked at these students who passed the marshmallow test or didn't pass, they looked at them as adolescents and what are the results of those who had good self-control. Basically, they were more successful. They had higher SAT scores. Their parents more likely to rate them as having a greater ability to plan. They could handle stress better. They responded to reason better. They had self-control in frustrating situations, and they could even concentrate without being distracted. So all of these, that little test showed the amount of self-control that this little person had. And it wasn't just the marshmallow. Who cares about the marshmallow? It's because in life...
Were they willing to delay gratification?
Right.
Were they willing to have self-control?
Exactly. So I just want to read this little quote here. It said that he believed that these skills... Mischel, the researcher, believed, and this is such a good point, the skills that enable us to delay gratification, those are the same skills, people, that help us make other good choices despite temptations to do otherwise. So this is not just it's not only about you having peace in your home, though of course that's wonderful.
I'm okay with that, right?
And that's good, but it's about training your child to make good choices and ultimately to have freedom, right? Because if we have the skills, if your child has the skills that allow you to make choices about when you should or shouldn't do something, when you do or don't drink something, when you do or don't wait for something, then you know what? Your child is no longer a victim of their desires.
That's right.
They, like Mike said to Claire, they are in control.
That's right. And isn't that what we want for our kids? And what, again, as Alicia, we talked about earlier, is the whole idea that our culture is about instant gratification. Our culture is telling both us, and it makes it so easy with our kids. Like, again, I don't think we're not anti-technology or iPads or screens or anything like that. But it's so easy to just pop your kids in front of the TV. And again, we're not saying don't ban that forever or don't do it ever. But it's like there are so many things that are like, okay, your kid is getting a tantrum on the way out of the grocery store because they want that piece of candy in the checkout line. Mm-hmm. You don't have to buy that every time. That doesn't mean that you're an evil person if you do it every now and then. But it's like, but if you're always responding to the demands and the outbursts,
you give them
of
everything
your child,
they want for the sake of peace.
You are undermining your own peace in your household, but probably more importantly, you're undermining their future prosperity and flourishing as an individual and the virtue that God wants to instill in them, because virtue means strength. You want to have strong children. You want to have children who have self-control. And the beginning of all virtue is having that.
And so when, going back to the study real quick, is that then they followed these
I think this is
people again, that when they were in their 40s.
Right. They looked at the same people, had the same data, right?
Same people, and it still held. Those people, those children at 4 years old who lacked self-control simply were not as successful as adults.
They had greater willpower. They had greater strength. They were more successful. And this is 4 decades later.
Right.
That those same individuals
had
that kind of high level of self-control compared to those who didn't.
And so what that says to me is that childhood and your role as a parent in what you are doing and the choices, how you're training your child right now is so important.
Right.
Is so important. And this again is where we would very humbly disagree, maybe not so humbly, with modern psychology, who would just say that, oh, you know what, it's done, it's set, that's just the way they are. They're always going to be like that. You know what, if I have a child who lacks in self-control at 4 years old, I'm going to work with that child.
That's
because there is no way as a parent that I could live with myself not knowing that I gave my child every advantage. How many activities, people, think about how many activities you sign your kid up for? Art class, soccer, dance class, theater, all those things, which I love, which are really important. But the reality is that those things...
How much time are you spending there?
But those things and how they're going to improve your child's life pale in comparison.
It's really not even worth comparing.
Pales in comparison to teaching your child self-control.
Yeah.
If I had to choose, do I want my child to take dance class for 10 years or learn self-control? Which is more important? people, the self-control is more important.
Amen.
How much time and energy...
Preach it, sister.
How much time and energy are you giving to teach your child that important skill compared to all of the activities and all that other stuff, which is fine and good, but is not going to improve their life to that same extent?
That's right. All right. So in kind of wrapping up here, we want to just highlight these principles for you as you look at
some takeaways.
Right. And so the first one that is that this battle is kind of stemming from what you just said, right? This battle must be won. It's worth it. You have to be intentional, recognizing that you're planting the seeds of self-control will build a prosperous garden for the rest of their lives. That this is essential to start when they're young and not back down, because you have both the authority and the responsibility to help form them. Again, you can't do it, but to form them in this. This is the opportunity to do it.
And I just want to say that we are giving you some principles, but a lot of this, guys, you're going to have to figure out yourself.
Right.
Because we always say, we're not the experts here. I don't think that what we're giving you is the be all and end all, but it's important for you to do your research. You can listen to us, but there's plenty of other great Christian resources to listen to, because it's important for you as a parent to figure this out. So anyway, the second thing as far as principles is just to remember, like Mike did with Claire, to try to bypass their emotions and activate the logical part of their brain when they're beginning to freak out. You can guide them through that now, but eventually they will need to learn to do that themselves.
Right.
They will need to learn to, especially when they're like teenagers, to activate the logical part of their brain. And even as adults, we can do this to kind of distract themselves, to ease the tension and help them to start thinking.
Right.
Okay.
And so the third thing would be help them to say how they're feeling. Right. So again, it's kind of
that kind of goes with the first.
Right. It goes really the one you just said, but it's becoming self-aware. But it's also putting logic to it. Again, it's not all about the brain, but it really helps to get them to a place where they're logically saying, okay, I know where I am at. And
I am feeling angry right now. And I know that this is very good advice given by a lot of parenting things out there to help your child to say, I'm angry. I am frustrated because of this. When sometimes
to voice
even
that.
Just the act of voicing that.
And it's bringing it to the light, because again, lots of things in our life, when they're unspoken, they have power over us in the darkness. And for your own child to get to a place where they can kind of name that, so they understand where they're coming from, so they're more self-aware, because then in the future, as they become older, they'll be able to know, I am really sensitive to this situation.
Right.
And I'm going to know how to cope with this. Again, you're building bridges for them to, again, maturely make those independent decisions later, but you're guiding them now, and so that they can do that, so they can become more self-aware, so they know these are my triggers, these are my buttons that can be pushed by individuals, by bullies, by whoever the situation might be, to get them to that place.
The next thing to remember is to really be your child's whisperer, like the example that we gave with Mike and Abby. Really know how to love them, especially when they're at that really emotional place. I do feel like maybe this is a little bit easier for Mike, because I get really emotional too, because I get really aggravated.
Hey, that's why we're both here, right?
So I have to call in Mike and be like, you have to go deal with that kid. I'm so angry.
I am the lifeline.
But anyway, for anyone to really, for yourself to activate your logical part of your thinking, but really know how to love them. And so you can help calm them down and really speak truth to them, so they can open their heart and their mind to you, and so you can teach them. And again, that's true whether they're 5, whether they're 10, whether they're 15. I think it's really important that you know your child, and that relationship is really important.
And you have to be the guide. Again, you're the parent. You're not the friend. You're not the whatever. You're the parent. So you can guide them to the truth. The truth is that they can control and master their emotions, that they are in charge and their emotions are not. And again, however you engage them as your child's own whisperer, getting to know them, the message is you want to get them to a place that they can be in charge of their emotions. That's period. I mean, they have the ability to overcome and direct their actions and their responses. No one can tell you how to feel. No one can force you to do anything. Coercion, minus physical coercion, they can't make you feel
not feel sad.
Right. Because again, later when they're teenagers, you're like, oh, well, he made me so mad when he did this. And I'm like, whoa, time out. Time out. That is not what we're talking about here. Again, when you're younger, you're planting these seeds so that they know the truth, that they are in control.
And this is where I think, again, modern psychology kind of fails us and just say, hey, just like feel it. Just allow yourself to feel it and don't repress that emotion. But we want them to know that you can control their emotional response. And remember Mike saying, who's in charge of having a good day?
That's right.
That's pretty much what we're saying there.
That's right. And another point too is just give them the space. Every child's a little different, but you want them to make the choice. Don't force them into doing it. You can force their actions, but depending on the situation. But ultimately, if you really want to teach self-control, you've got to give them space. Again, as they're a little bit older, to make that choice, to give them the time, give them the breath. So it's voluntary because, again, you're trying to build up the muscle, the virtue in them that they can have that kind of self-control.
Like Mike said with Abby, you can stay in here and pull yourself together. When you walk out of this room, I want you to walk out of this room with a smile on your face, and you got to make that choice. But he gave her a couple minutes, to be able to do that and to collect himself. And really, again, like what I had said to my son, Mikey, I think it's good to frame it in moral terms for older children because we need to teach them what is sin and what is not. That is our responsibility. Yes, religious education, they should be emphasizing what you're teaching them at the home, but it's your responsibility that they know that losing it, screaming at someone, throwing something at someone is sinful.
Right.
Those actions are sinful. And it's good to frame it in those terms. And to remember that the fruit of the Holy Spirit is, one of the fruits of the Holy Spirit is self-control. In Galatians, Paul talks about that when you have your, allow your flesh to control you, you cannot be free.
That's right.
You cannot be free.
True Christian freedom is not
about
giving in, yielding to the flesh.
Exactly. This is Galatians 5:22-24. But the fruit, and so first he says, this is when you are in bondage to the flesh.
Right, because that's really what it is. We're talking about our kids being slaves to their emotions.
Exactly. But when you have the Holy Spirit, the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. And against such things there is no law. For those who belong to Christ Jesus have crucified the flesh with its passion and desires. And that's what our children are called to do, and we are called to do, is to say no to our flesh. Say no to our flesh and say yes to the Holy Spirit. And if they have trouble doing that, and when their actions lead them astray, they need to know you need to go to confession because that's sinful to act in that way. And I think that is a great way just to lead them on the path of life.
Amen.
All right.
And we should have said this, but I think we do this oftentimes, is that the first person they're going to learn self-control from is watching you and the witness that you have.
That's a lot of pressure.
I know. I'm so sorry to bring that up at the end here. But the reality is that if you aren't in control of your emotions, it's going to be really hard for you to lead them.
And like Mike always says, we both thought we were very good people until we had children.
Oh, man.
So this is also, all of these lessons here are good for you because, hey, parenting is our path to holiness as well.
All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. It was, perennial topic, like we said before.
Absolutely.
But some of the key takeaways,
and these will be in the show notes.
They'll be in the show notes, so you can follow along. Because I've had people tell me before, they're like, I'm listening when I'm driving and I can't take notes. I'm like, well, we're doing our best to give you at least some key takeaways here, so that you can look at this at another time. Again, it's not everything that may have struck you, but some key takeaways. First, emotional outbursts are a sign of immaturity, right? But as your children grow...
And it's okay for a 5-year-old to be immature.
Absolutely.
That's what it means
That's
to be 5.
They are.
That's what it means to be 6 or 7.
For having your 18-year-old having that, it's a different point, right?
Exactly.
So, but as they grow, you teach them and they will learn it. It is that process, but you can't get under control when they're young. If you don't do it now, you're going to be really sorry later. Really got to build these habits in early. Right. And we kind of mentioned this in the beginning, but in some ways, at least, the self-control is, in our culture, is an underappreciated virtue, right? It's just do it. If the fear of missing out, meaning just go for it. Just do whatever you want, as opposed to pause. Do I have get my emotions in check? Is this a line? All of that. This is self-control is not lauded by our culture. It is not something that's prized.
Right. Next key takeaway is important to train your children early. One of the reasons it's so important is because, and I was actually talking to one of my kids' a counselor that they go to, and he pointed out that children's brains are so malleable that the habits that they do when they are 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, they're training their brain. And this includes emotional control. And so often parents focus so much on training in athletics or in academics during this time, we're neglecting this virtue. And honestly, this virtues of self-control and other virtues, that's where your child is going to find real success. And so that's one of the things that we really should focus on as parents. So another key takeaway, when your child is emotional, when they're losing control, teach them how to activate the logical part of their brain. You are helping them. You are walking alongside them, helping them regulate their emotions as when they're children, and you're teaching them, you're modeling for them. These are the kind of like self-talk that you can have so they can learn how to do it themselves. And last, give your kids space. Give them space to make a choice. Don't stand there and be like, get under control, you know, but instead say, okay, you need to think about this. You need to have this time. You're allowed to cry. And then when you're ready, I'm going to be here for you. Right. So give them the space, because when they choose to control themselves, the more they do, it's like a muscle, the stronger and the better they're going to be at it.
Discipline equals freedom. Self-control equals freedom. We want, and no virtue is possible without freedom. So we've got to give them the ability to take ownership, move that locus of control from the external, us imposing things, to them internally, the locus of control that they're ordering themselves. There are just 3 questions here. One is just kind of making it personal. How would you define self-control, and why is it important to you?
Right.
How do you respond? Again, this is a conversation for you and your spouse, right? How do we respond to our children when they lose?
Good to evaluate that.
Yeah.
If you don't like the way your spouse is responding, talk about it.
But remember, whenever you're speaking to your spouse, you're speaking in I statements, and say, how do you think? Or, asking it in questions, so that you're really curious, so as not criticizing and not putting down the other. But honestly talking about it, what do we think about that, right? And then what are some specific strategies, right? Looking at your child, particularly a child who might be giving you the run for your money. Right. How can you, as a couple, come together and say, what are strategies for our children in a specific way?
Yep.
All right. Well, hey, we hope you enjoyed today's podcast. And if you did, please like, share, pass it on to your friends. We'd love to hear from you, and visit us for more information on this and other resources at messyfamilyproject.org. And until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you.